And we are back for part two.
Yes.
With me again is Frayne. And so we left off, as I recall, and I got sidetracked to a executive protection story when we were in Decatur, Illinois, and it was a good assignment, it was a good project, but that was well before it was well before 9/11 and the events that kind of turned things around. So yeah, and I think I kind of jumped. I did like a time leap, backwards. We talked about 9/11 and where I was on 9/11. I was actually in Northern Virginia, and then we kind of backed ourselves into the ADM kind of thing. It's all about that damn movie with Matt Damon. Curse you, Matt. Curse you, Matt Damon. But yeah, anyway, The Insider. The Insider, the movie's called, just because it popped into my head. But so yeah, so on September 11th, sitting there in Northern Virginia, and probably like everybody else at the time, as everything was unfolding, um, the first call that I made, I mean, I called home first because I'd been out all night, the night before. I had no idea what happened while I was asleep. So I called my wife as I turned on the television, saw it all unfold, and wrapped up the call with her relatively quickly. And then I called the Navy recruiting offices back here in Pittsburgh. I thought, might as well start at the beginning. And that's where I had come through the process back in '89. And, I gave him a call. The young officer answered the phone, and I told him, how fast can you get me back to active duty? And literally within the time that I was waiting for them to call back, I got a call from a good friend of mine who worked for that same company in the private sector who had moved on to government contracting earlier. And, I guess as people do in times like those, everyone was, people are calling their friends, hey, you okay? Where are you? How are you? And this and this. So I get a call from a dear friend of mine, and he was like, hey, how are you doing? And good, how are you? Where are you? And this and this. And long story short, he was like, "Well, how'd you like to come to work with us? There's a project starting up, and I'd be glad to get you the information." That was it. I mean, that was it. It happened kind of fast after that. But what I found really interesting was when you're totally new to this, like, okay, so you start getting email, and the company was DynCorp. DynCorp was the company that was arranging the contractors, and it would support a Department of State mission. So it was like, okay, well, one thing and another. The first few emails, and then you pick up on the like little subtleties and nuances. The first few emails, and I mean, I'm not for nothing. Even I know not to do this. When you run a competition here at the gym, or you put out a mass mailing, you don't put everybody's name in the recipient list. Right?
Yeah.
That's amateur.
Amateur hour, yeah.
Right? So, but first few emails were like pretty densely populated, and they're like, okay, fill out this questionnaire, fill out this, and back then, oh my God, largely a lot of things were pen and paper. So there's a form, an SF-86, and it was essentially your security clearance, questionnaire, your bona fides, I guess, really long, labor intensive. And I mean, never want to do that again by hand, ever. But, fill this out, fill this out, fill this out. And then you're thinking, like, okay, well, what's next? What's next? Am I going to make the selection process? What if I don't? And I think, like anything else, anybody that's ever applied for a job has that feeling of like, well, what if I don't get it? But I think in this case, I don't know. At that time, I think the stakes might have been a little bit higher because you're like, no, I want to get back in. I want to do something to serve. I mean, it's a known fact that military enlistments across the board in every branch of the service skyrocketed after 9/11. And it never occurred to me that I'm like, yeah, well, here's like, at the time, I didn't think I was that old, but I was in my late 30s. But at the same time, I was like, yeah, but I've got some knowledge and experience that I'd like to bring to the table. So the first thing I noticed was really really interesting was subsequently, the emails, the recipient list started to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was like, huh, yeah, I noticed it, but I didn't really register. Didn't really think too much of why. But as it all played out, this rolled probably into like, God, it took a couple months. Like nothing happens that fast. It took a few months. And next thing you know, it's down to like maybe 8 names, 8 or 9 names. And now they're getting like finalized. Okay, you'll depart your home of record this time, and now you realize you're going because you did all your insurance paperwork and all your W-9, 1099 to receive a W-9 as a contract employee. We did all of that, and then you get like your primary next of kin notification forms and all that. You're like, oh, dude, this is
It's
now.
real
Now
now.
you kind of know. You're like, well, if you're asking me who to notify when I die, I'm pretty sure you're sending me. So we're good to go. We're ready to go. And honest to God, man, the messed up part of this story is some of these guys are gone now, but I'll never forget. It's like I get my email. It's like, okay, pardon me, Black Rifle Coffee, Green Team Selection of the Month in my Jocko Get After It mug. Doesn't get better than this. And well, much. Anyway, so and I stomped all over this little policy last time. I don't do last names.
Yeah.
But I will say this. Here's my thing. I believe with all my heart, if it was a good experience, if it was a good dude, then they need to be recognized. And fortunately, a lot of these guys, mentors of mine, and everything like that, we're out of the game now. So, you know, um, knuckleheads, they get maybe a call sign or a first name because they're part of the story, and sometimes a funny part of the story, but they don't. That's that. But anyway, God, I'll never forget this. I kind of wish many times I wish I could go back to this minute. So I get an email and it's broken down and it's like, okay, Petrogallo, you'll fly in to Dulles and you'll meet John Branchizio at the Hertz rental car at this time. He's coming in from Texas at this hour, this flight. You'll meet him at rental. So I'm like, John Branchizio, right? And it's like Parsons, you'll meet Clark at the rental car at this time, and then you'll go to this hotel. You'll link up with Jim and yada yada. Super. So I get there, and I'm all kind of geeked out. And I get to the Hertz rental car place, and I'm waiting, I'm looking around. And all of a sudden, I see this guy, and he's big, man. He's not a small guy. He's but like fit looking, like dirty blonde, like sandy blonde hair, kind of. And he's looking around. He sees me, and he goes, "Hey." And I'm like, I mean, from that moment, he comes over and he goes, "You must be Petrogallo." And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Hey, John Branchizio." And I'm like, "Hey, Mike Petrogallo." And he shakes my hand and he's like, like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Hey," he goes, "I knew it. Big tactical bag. Dago knows." He goes, "I figured." And then he goes like this. He turns and he goes, "See?" He's like, "I knew it." And Branchizio and Petrogallo. So we get the rental car. We go to the hotel. And for some reason or other, and I don't remember how or why. Normally, what they'll do for training purposes, for stuff like that, they'll double guys up in their hotel rooms. I remember having a private room, and I don't remember if they gave us all private rooms or not. But it's kind of nice at the end of the day to be able to go home and call home, and you're not having a conversation with you're bothering somebody else or whatever. But I think maybe we all did get our own room, but it's irrelevant. But I remember because it gets funny later on about the housing. So there was the school that they sent us to, and this was, oh my God, this was so fast. I mean, this was just the way it was. At that time, there were already 2 teams in place in Jerusalem. The contract was going to support the diplomatic mission in Israel. And the way it was set up at the time, this was 2002. The consulate was in Jerusalem. The embassy was in Tel Aviv. So they sent 2 teams already there, were in Jerusalem, we were going to Tel Aviv. Great. So we go through, and again, you're getting to know everybody, right? So our point of contact, Jim, don't know anything about him, never met him before. We meet him, quiet guy, very quiet, very reserved guy. And now I realize, man, he's quiet. He was like sizing us up. He's like, what band of idiots did they send me?
So how many of you were there? So you and your other Italian friends, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah. So let's see. So Jim was there. We met him, like he came in early. So he was there. John Branchizio, Mark Parsons, me, Mike, Kurt, another Mike.
Always.
Yeah, another Mike, and who else? Keith. Keith. Now, the way this was going to work, so there were 8 of us.
Okay.
There were 8 of us, and there would be 8 in Tel Aviv. All right, that was going to be the complement. But how this worked out was through, who knows why, I don't know, somebody took a liking to somebody, and one of the team leaders that they picked was already over there. They sent him early, and he was up in Jerusalem getting the lowdown, but he'd be one of the 2 team leaders in Tel Aviv. Jim would be the other one.
Okay.
Keith, now, this guy, to this day, I consider him a dear friend. Absolute legend in Delta. Legend. Like one of the first Delta operators, and a nicer guy. Put it this way, in my opinion, that's all this is one of the guys that's like, the first time I met him, big smile. He's a bear of a dude. I mean, he is a bear of a dude. Like, shake your hand and you feel like your hand's in like a suitcase. You're like, oh, hey. But at the same time, just real, hey, all right, yeah, okay. And then you're looking and you're like, well, the years might have mellowed this guy out a little bit, but you can tell there's still a glimmer that this guy is legendary. That's all I'll say about that. But humble and helpful, and just a good dude. And but now here's what was happening, because one of our 2 team leaders was already in country, getting in docked up in Jerusalem. Keith wasn't. He went through the spin up with us, but when we got on the ground, he went straight up to Jerusalem. I don't even have this other team leader. Put it this way. His nickname, and not affectionately, he was referred to as Swervin, because he was all over the damn road. And I don't mean that as a driver. I mean, let's get to that in a minute. But he was already there. So it was kind of, we're like, man, we're going. And this wasn't like a grueling selection process. I mean, this really was, your capabilities with a firearm, your basic qualification on a range with a pistol, with a rifle. You're, I would have to say, from the training that I had before and since, this was absolute bare bones minimum. And to be totally honest, looking back, this would be something that I would send non-essential personnel through if they were coming over in a support capacity. So if we get overrun and you have to defend yourself because I'm already dead, you'll know how to use this pistol and not shoot yourself in the foot. I can't say what's going to happen after that, but you should be able to pull it from your holster and not shoot yourself in the foot. But, and this is client driven. This is no reflection on the school,
right,
or the instructors that put us through training. The instructors at Crucible at that time, it was in Fredericksburg, Virginia. It's probably still, but Crucible, Fredericksburg, Virginia. Met some guys there going through training that to this day I keep in touch with, and not a lot, but I just reached out to one of them, Brian, on the 20th anniversary, and I'm like, brother, it's hard to believe it's 20 years, and he was a dear friend of Cheese, and it's so, like I said, there's no reflection on them or their curriculum or anything. It's client driven. And I think at that time, I mean, it'd be naive to think that dollars don't drive the engine, right? Yeah, you got to get guys over there. Going to put them through this, making sure they don't shoot each other in the ass and go, right? Okay. And what I'm about to tell you is absolute gospel truth. If I wouldn't have seen it myself, I would have absolutely called bullshit. Okay.
Noted.
One of the guys, his name was Mike. There are three of us, three Mikes. Okay. Two of us made it downrange, one didn't. So we're in the classroom. And again, very cut and dry. All right. This is the Glock 19 you'll be carrying over there, and yada yada, semi-automatic pistol. I mean, it's a Glock. It's a fantastic weapon, right? Great. So classroom portion. All right, gather up your gear. We're going to walk out. We're going to go through the gravel path. We're going to get to the pistol range. We're going to shoot the pistol qual, or practice for the qual, what have you. So we get there. Now, to this day, Jim, my team leader, I consider him more than a friend. He's like a brother. He's like an older brother, but not much, a little bit. But at this point, he is still watching every move. Who's who, because I got to take these guys into harm's way, and I don't know what they sent me. And I do get this. We came from diverse backgrounds, right? Among that group, like I said, Keith was an absolute legend in the unit. Jim was at one time, he had been the youngest Ranger ever to be selected for Delta. And then years later, I would work, or he was a trainer on a course that we went through. He was then the youngest Ranger that made it to Delta. So it was a friend of Jim's. Dale is his name. But, to me, I look at it like if you're an avid golfer and fate puts you in a foursome with Tiger Woods, you say a quick thank you, God, for letting me be like so close to this guy who's forgotten. Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to learn by accident because this guy is so talented, right? And I say that with all sincerity. I feel blessed to have been able to work with these guys and learn from them. But at this moment, Jim was like, there was no, he was cordial, but he was like distant and observant. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. And I didn't know it could happen. I did not know this was possible. I never tried it. We get to the range. Great. And again, the instructors were running this by the numbers, like, because it's that, that's what this curriculum calls for. Shooters with a loaded magazine, load your weapons, right? Shooters, charge your weapons, right? Getting ready to holster. One of the mics is next to me. Now, when you run a hot range, and when you say, all right, gentlemen, this is like advanced curriculum now. You get a malfunction, fix it. If you've tried and you can't, safety's sake, muzzle down range, finger off the trigger always, right? If you cannot fix it, throw a hand up. This wasn't like that. This was like, if there is a malfunction, if there is an issue, throw your hand up and an instructor will come to you. Well, this guy doesn't throw his hand up, doesn't do anything. All I hear him going is, oh, something's not right. Like it was yesterday. Oh, something's not right. Something's not right. So shooters, holster your weapons, right? So holster. So I'm right beside him, right? He's not throwing up his hand. So I go, what? And he's like it won't cycle, it won't load. And I'm like, well, drop the magazine. Like, it's not my place to say, but I'm watching him flounder here. And I will say this, he wasn't doing anything stupid. He wasn't going, oh, I don't know. So it's, muzzles down and all that. And he's like, oh, it won't cycle. And I was like, well, drop the magazine. So he ejects the magazine. I don't tell him to show it to me, but he ejects the mag and he shows it to me. For a moment, not even. I'm looking at this. I can't comprehend what I'm looking at. I'm like the bevel in the magazine's that way, but the primer, the base of the round is, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm thinking he loaded the magazine backwards. So I'm like, I didn't know you could do that. I never tried, right? I would have no reason to try, but I was like, okay, that's odd, right? So now I'm holstered. His weapon is safe and he's still holding it in the safe direction. I've got his magazine in my hand, right? So I'm like, now I start to try to strip the rounds out to put him in the right way. Dude, like a ninja had a baby with an Apache Indian, right? Jim is right over my shoulder. He's already seen what I'm doing, but he goes, "What's wrong?" So he's giving me the opportunity to do the right thing. And I go, "Nothing, nothing. I got it. I got it." And he's like, and he just kind of gives this, you know, and he goes, "All right." So somehow we stripped the rounds out. We fixed it, but I know that he knows. And I'm like, man, look, and I know that he knows it's not my weapon, it's not my magazine. If I wasn't beside him in line, I'd have never been involved in it, right? So and I guess that to me that's like, oh crap, that's one, right? I think in Jim's mind it was like, yeah, that's more than one, but okay, right? So we do that, and then and I can't blame the guy for being invited. You apply for something. It's like asking an extremely hot girl to go out. Seriously, man. First time I met my wife, I'm like, oh, I'm asking her.
Yeah.
I mean, she might say no. You've seen her.
Yeah.
I'm surprised she didn't. But no, it's okay. I know. But if you don't take the chance,
Right.
how do you know? So I don't blame him for applying. And anybody looks good on a resume, okay. And he was a police officer, and that's not that departmentally. I don't know where he worked, but departmentally, and he made it. Oh yeah, I never fired a Glock, and I'm like, yeah, but it's a weapon. That's
Right.
all it is, man. Well, we carry wheel guns. We carry wheel guns, revolvers.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, I got you. I got you. And that is a difference. But I also thought like, oh, okay, well, that certainly would explain that you don't understand the nomenclature and all this. So I get it. Super. So I don't couldn't even tell you how he performed. I don't remember. But so we wrap up the range, and I will say this, and I'll keep saying this: the instructor cadre that they had there, those guys were on. They were on, and understand this whole thing happened so fast. It wasn't like, well, what were the instructors doing while he was, man, you got the lead instructor driving the train and he's, everybody's where they're supposed to be. This thing happened so quick. Here I am trying to fix it fast to get him back in battery and on target. I should have just stayed out of it. I guess maybe would have been better. So, but that was probably Jim's like first impression. Like, okay, he's an idiot, but you're a bigger idiot. I don't know. I don't know. I hope not. To this day, we're very good friends, so maybe that wasn't the case. But and I don't remember if it was that afternoon or the next day. Now it's time for the M4. It's time for the rifle. And here's the thing: we're in the classroom, and they go from beginning to end, like on a PowerPoint. Okay, this is the M4 weapon system, just like they did with the Glock, to include this is the magazine, this is the capacity. This is essentially like, I'm pretty sure if I had one of my kids and I showed him that PowerPoint, and then I'm like, all right, weapons manipulation, here we go. Pretty sure they would have done it okay, right? Great. So now, and I don't have the heart to do this. I did not have the heart to change the order and like, no, I'm going to sit over there or didn't. So I'm like, oh, a minute. Because again, I had some mentors over the years that I felt were like, hey man, these guys kept me on the path and least I can do is try to help, right? The least I could do. In hindsight, I realized that what a mistake it was, because this guy could have deployed with us, right? And I get that, but that is not the environment. You can always get better. You can always sharpen your skill sets, but there's a minimum that you should meet, that you have to meet. So anyway, we go through the briefing for the M4, draw our weapons, we gather, and here we go, going back downrange, right? Follow the gravel path, out the door, yada, yada, yada. I kid you not. He slides up beside me on the walk, and he goes, so hey, before we get to the range, school me up on the M4. I'm like, what? Like, school you up on the M4. At that point, I almost had a meltdown. I'm like, school you up on the M4? I go, well, dude, it's just. I was like, okay, charging handles back, locked, right? You can clearly, visually, you see bolts back, charging handles, you pull back, lock, boom. I'm like, you insert the magazine, send the bolt forward, round in the chamber, weapons hot, you're on safe, here you go, right? Off safe, hot, on safe, not. Pew pew, like the pointy end that way, right? Super. I couldn't tell you how he performed. Don't remember. Neither do I remember any other blunders. I don't, because at that point, like, I really was. I'm like, I'm not going to be that guy. I will always help,
Right.
but I can't be like, I've got to do my job. I got to make sure, I'm doing in qualifying and everything like that. So, unbeknownst to me, now to back up a notch. So, um, Keith was Delta, Jim was Delta, Cheese was Dev Group, right? So, these guys are like a very impressive roster. And then the bad news bears, right? The rest of us. And so, unbeknownst to me, and I think this was a class act, 100%. Um, Keith would be going, like it keeps, he'll be going up to Jerusalem, but Cheese will be with us in Tel Aviv, Jim, and Swervin was going to come down from Jerusalem, and he would take, one of the teams. So I guess Jim called Cheese one night, said, "Hey man, come to my room," and he's like, "Dude, we can't take this guy. I mean, this is a problem." And I don't know what was said about fucking Rocky trying to help him. I don't know, but sharp enough, that they're like, "Hey man, somebody's got to make the call." So the next day they did, and as I recall, and I didn't know this at the time because it was none of my business, and that's the thing that I'll always say about Jim and his level of professionalism. He's like, "Hey man, it's my team, it's my responsibility, and this isn't gossip. This isn't about anything. This is about taking guys downrange." And really at the time, Israel was a bit of an anomaly. All right, um, Afghanistan had already kicked off. It was post 9/11. Afghanistan had already kicked off. We had not yet invaded Iraq. All right, that had not happened. But the Israeli mission was the agenda was, again, like the Israeli Palestinian always kind of brewing. Something just hit the building.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Oh my! I hope it's none of those guys I made enemies with over. Never mind. Got a little something for them if they decide to show up, but it's not coffee. But anyway, I guess they had a talk. Cheese and Jim, and they're like, "No, we can't take him." And as I recall, and again, I did not hear this at the time because it wouldn't have been any of my business. Only after, once we got, to be more cordial and a little bit more time and distance, Jim was like, "Dude," he's like, "I made that phone call." He goes, "The ration of shit that I got from DynCorp. Oh, you can't take him. He's got to go. We got 8 people. They want 8 people. We got 8 people." And again, you realize it's billable hours. In that moment, it's billable hours. No one will convince me otherwise. And again, you got two types of people, I think. You get the type that's like, "I'm not saying anything. I'm not making waves. I mean, this is good money. It's a good contract." Now, Jim believed it was good money and it was a good contract, but he wasn't going to compromise principle and to stick to his convictions. He's like, "No, no, you can't take him. I won't take him." So, next thing you know, like I think I made reference to this the last time. You're like, "Yep, that black helicopter's spinning up in the parking lot. Hear it? Yep, that's for you." But yeah, so he ended up leaving, and
I mean, I was going to say the thing that's terrifying to me, just hearing this. So you can be you get called up for this contract. You've got Delta, like all sorts of highly proficient war fighters. And how did this? I mean, and again, I don't want to besmirch this individual. I don't know who this
no,
person,
no, I I,
but
I understand.
it's just. I mean, if you don't have, if I just think from my perspective, if I were signing up and I say I'm going to get deployed now, I mean, you got to go to a range, shoot. I mean, handle some basic weapons
Right,
because I know the whole principle. I mean, as I understand it with these special teams, is like you. I want to make sure that I trust you and you trust me.
right.
Conversely, and if I'm sitting there thinking this guy doesn't even know how to put rounds correctly into a Glock, and we're gonna be over, and he's gonna be watching my
Oh yeah,
back in like a month or two from now.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. That just
Well, like I said, I think what was amazing to me was, and being around a few contracts, I think, I would see this happen again later. I would see it again later, but sometimes they are security driven, clearance driven, security clearance driven.
okay.
All right, so um, or you know a guy who thinks you'd be a good fit, right? How he got recommended, a friend of a friend, who knows? I mean, I got recommended by a friend. So a friend of mine tells his friend in, HR or talent acquisitions or whatever they're calling it at that time. So I get there, but I don't load my magazine wrong. I don't, do anything inappropriate on the call, and that's that. But you're absolutely right. I think but again, it just to me it reinforces if you didn't have a guy like Jim who made that, like, drawing the line right here, can't take him.
Right.
Hopefully, what would have happened was we'd get downrange. He'd make a blunder that doesn't cost anything, and then he'd be sent home. But at the same time, I think Jim's just, no, we're not. I know what's going to happen. If this happened here when we've got all the time in the world, and it wasn't some kind of training scenario where you walk into a room and it's just like what do we call it? Like a fire sale where, like, there's magazines over here, there's loose rounds over there, and the instructor's like, "Go! You've got 30 seconds." It was none of that. It was like, "Here's your ammunition. Here's your magazines. Load your magazines." I mean, the instructors could not have been more user friendly, straightforward, on task. So again, the right call was made. He didn't end up going. But now this put us in a bit of a situation because now we're supposed to be 8, but we're 7. And Jerusalem's not going to let us keep Keith until we get, because they're already expecting him. So, really, there's nothing more remarkable about that time frame. And bear in mind, like, we didn't know some of this stuff. Like, it's just like, oh, hey, Mike's not going with us. Okay. So, we get our gear, we get our equipment, we get on the flight, and we're downrange. So, if I remember, we flew from Dulles, I want to say Dulles to Newark to Jerusalem, I'm pretty sure. When we landed at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, not Jerusalem, but Ben Gurion's, the international airport there. So when we landed, we had been given, I think we were on official passports then. So the passports go like a tourist, official, and diplomatic. Right? So the U.S. passport is blue, right? The official passport looks identical, only it's like a maroon color. Same crest, same everything. But when you open it, it says the bearer of this passport is on official business for the United States government. Diplomatic passport's black. This individual, the bearer of this passport, rather, is on a diplomatic mission, for the United States. So we had official passports. So we land, and we're like, okay. And in a long flight, everything, and there's excitement because you're like, man, this is it. Like, we're here, But what was so odd about Israel was, like, you're going into an environment where after the Intifada, the second Intifada had already occurred, so you already had hostilities, overt hostilities between Palestinians and Israelis. But any given moment of the day, like, you wouldn't know it. I mean, the weather's beautiful, the people are wonderful. It's a beautiful airport. We land, all of a sudden it's one of those, like, and they had like the transports, like not the jetway.
Mm-hmm.
So they steps up, boom, here we come down. All of a sudden this single vehicle rolls over, stops. This guy with sunglasses gets out. Actually, Jennifer's on her way up the steps right now, so it's a good thing I wasn't doing anything stupid. So this the van stops, guy with these sunglasses gets out, and he motions us over. Hi, sweetheart.
Are you recording?
We're recording. Come on in, grab a seat.
Not if you're recording. Pause it.
Time out. We break for a word from our sponsor.